Good evening, everybody. It's 9 o'clock. It's PJ Colello. We're going to wait, like we always do, for a couple more minutes as I can see people are logging in. 9:01. We'll get started in 2 minutes. One more minute, everybody. One more minute. All right, guys, it's 9:03. We're going to get the show on the road. Um, Before we start, I want to, every time you try and do something new, there's always a risk. And this, like anything else, is a risk, and we greatly, and risks sometimes fall flat on their face. Sometimes they work out great, and sometimes they fall somewhere in between. And I think this worked out really well. I think we've got stuff that we can do to improve for next year. I think the first thing we'll do is we'll probably take this call and move it back 1 week so that we're not in this very last week of April. But I want to thank, on behalf of the board and everybody who took the time out of their busy schedules at a time of the year when there is less time than ever to join us on these 4 evenings. And on behalf of the board and the membership, I would like to thank Tom Sutton and Tom Abbott and Charlie Obermeyer, because an awful lot of work goes into putting together these presentations, and especially Sutton with all the work he did on the PowerPoint presentations. And we kind of threw this on him. This was not something that was part of our December plan, like the forum and the quizzes were, and this is just an additional responsibility that he took on and embraced, and he does an awful lot of work for our group, and I want to publicly thank him as well. And without further ado, the fourth director's call, NILOA director's call.
All right. Thanks, PJ. I do appreciate the kind words for sure. And I didn't think I'd have my sidekick tonight, Tommy Abbott. I knew he was traveling, but I guess he drove fast enough to get to his hotel. And he is with us tonight. We're going to try to keep the call fairly short tonight. I know all you football fanatics that want to know how great your team is going to do in the draft. Cleveland's off to a good start, I see, according to Charlie, who's giving me blow-by-blow. So Baker Mayfield and Tyrod Taylor can bring the Browns to the Super Bowl, I guess. So we're all good there. They're looking for another 0-6.
We'll see, Tommy.
So a couple things we're going to talk about tonight. The agenda's up on the screen. We're going to talk about the conference playoffs a little bit. We're going to talk about the pregame, officiating a timeout, how important a timeout is, and we're going to talk about some things that can help us not only recognize them but not miss them. We're going to talk about play on a little bit, and then game management, always part of the game and a big part of the game. Some do it good, some do it fair, and some don't do it at all. So anytime we can talk about game management and give some tips and pointers, it's a good thing. And then finally, we'll talk about the new face-off mechanic again. Nothing we're changing right now. We've changed it the last call, and we just want to remind people of it. So we'll go ahead and get right into it. Oops, sorry about that. Okay, we'll start with the pregame. It's a little out of order of the agenda, but that's okay. The pregame this time of year can't be stressed enough, the importance of it. A thorough pregame, a pregame that gets all the people involved. People need to come to these games prepared. Conference time, playoff time is a different time of year. And the more you can come prepared to the game, the more you participate in that pregame. In other words, it's not just the referee's duty to conduct the pregame and try to get everybody on the same page. Everybody needs to participate within that pregame and make sure they understand exactly what the referee is trying to tell them to get them on the same page. It does you no good to go to the pregame and talk about items. It does some good, but not a whole lot of good to talk about the same items, the same routine issues that we've talked about all year. Somebody needs to try to come up with scenarios that happened in the last 3-4 games that they were in, questions they have, etc. You just talk about the same routine stuff over and over again. You know, you're not going to be prepared for the unusual circumstances that can come up during the game. Very important for us to show up on time. And, you know, I've worked a couple games and people have never been to the location, never been to the locker room, never been to the field, never been to the university. It's important to come early if you had never been there and you don't know where you're going. You know, it's frustrating for the crew to be sitting around waiting for a member of the crew to do a pregame, and then you try to rush and jam your pregame in, and it's not very thorough and really not very helpful. So if you aren't sure where you're going, which can happen this time of year, you know, they move the stadiums, they move to different locations in the college campuses where they're going to play. Make sure you show up early enough to make sure you get to the room when the referee requests you to be in the room. We talked a little bit about the conference playoffs already, and they're starting this weekend. Next weekend, they're in full bore. That'd be all 3 levels, 1, 2, and 3 in MCLA. The club teams are also right there at the same timing. It's very important to the assigners that you go update your availability, both in Arbiter for the MCLA side, ZebraWeb for the MLAX OG side. Division 2 and 3 assigners are going to need that information. So if you're not available, please go in there. There's nothing more frustrating for a signer to go in and assign a game to somebody that says they're available, then they can't do the game when it's assigned. And Tommy, do you want to talk about availability?
Yeah, I will here, Tommy. I think it's important that guys make sure that they know that this whole system is different than before. For example, if you were in District 3, Noel would basically do all of the assignments that were based in that area. And Warren, over the years, would do the Division 1 stuff. And it's important to make sure that we try to keep the same vein going for this year. But if your availability is up to date, I'm trying to avoid issues of where we have available officials who are qualified to do conference games who are sitting at home because of a mistake or a glitch that we may have had in our system this year that we didn't have before. So just be patient with us. The best you can do is make sure your availability is up to date in both locations, especially in Zebra Web, because it's really where we've done the entire season, and conferences are done that way. In most cases, I've looked at the system over the last week and a half or 2 weeks now to try and figure out all the playoff scenarios for Division I, and I know that the other assigners are doing the same thing in all of their conference games and all their leagues. And many of them are on the same date. Friday, Saturdays are booked solid. We're trying to make sure we have everybody available to do what we need to do and get the right folks in the right spot. So those availabilities really need to be done. We can't really assign like we normally do during the season until we actually know the teams, and that won't happen until after this weekend's over. So there's kind of a mad rush between Saturday night and Tuesday to figure out where everybody has to go. So make sure that those availabilities are there. I want to just jump back for a second about Tommy's pregame conversation just a minute ago. I think his point should be really well taken, that it's important for you to be there on time and to participate. And just like teams and players evolve over the season, we have plays and things that we have seen or heard of that have occurred in games, and we need to evolve and be able to do and discuss those before games. So that pregame should be different now than it was at the beginning of the season. It needs to be a little bit more in depth. It needs to be involve some of those issues that we've seen recently. Before we got on this call, I just asked the guys who were on the call prior to this if they'd seen long face-offs that take a long time to get out of there. That seems to be a new thing and a new trend over the last 3-4 weeks. So I think that's should be part of your pregame discussion. I've even heard of teams worrying about what stick heads are being used. They use a different tactic or a different stick head against a particular stick head of the opponent. So if you see long face-offs, there's probably a reason for it. So do the best that you can with it. Make sure you talk about it ahead of time. And again, getting back to this conference thing now, I want to skip back to conference playoffs. Remember, this is a time that's do and die for everyone. They are all stressed out. It could mean jobs for some coaches. It's the last games for seniors. There's a lot of emotions that are involved this weekend and next and beyond. So just like I had in my memo from last week, when everybody else is losing their marbles, we have to make sure that we keep ours straight and in order, and we act professional about it. So conference time is really, really stressful for coaches, and we need to do the best job that we can out there.
All right. Thanks, Tommy. And, on behalf of the board and the leadership of our group, we do wish everybody luck through this time of the year. And for those that get an opportunity, take a minute and enjoy the moment. You worked hard to get there, and you should be proud to be there, and it's an honor to be there. So enjoy the moment as you go through the process. All right. Now, hopefully we'll talk some topics that will actually help a little bit, make the game go a little smoother. First thing we're going to talk about, I like to talk about is in pregame a lot is officiating a timeout. I think that's a very important aspect of the game. As possessions become more and more important, so does the use of timeouts by coaches. They're trying to save a possession. It's important to them to save that possession, and as a result, we need to be aware and ready for the timeout call. And hopefully as we go through the presentation tonight, it'll prepare you guys, maybe give you some things to think about that you may or may not have thought about before. But again, as you go into these games, and there are going to be a lot of one-goal games. There's been a lot all year, and one possession can make a difference between a tie and a loss, or going into overtime and a possible win. It falls on us to make sure we're ready to make that timeout call. Again, all we're doing is supplying you some tools, some ideas. We can't make the calls, but we can hopefully give you some ideas how to make it easier. I try to break timeouts into different aspects, and I like to call them a defensive timeout and an offensive timeout. What I mean by that is the defensive timeout, the defensive timeouts, this is a must for us to get. We can't miss a defensive timeout. I always like to tell my guys, we can miss an offensive timeout. What I mean by that is we can miss an offensive timeout in most cases because we can still call the timeout when the ball goes live, right? What we can't call is a defensive timeout once the ball is blown back in play. The defensive timeout, if we miss that defensive timeout, it usually creates all kinds of hassle for us as far as game management, managing the coach, because the coach is going to lose his mind. If he wanted a timeout, he deserved a timeout, and we didn't give him a timeout on a defensive timeout. So keep that in mind. Defensive timeouts, I'd like to talk a little bit more about that in the pregame and what we can do to make sure we're there. First thing you got to do is identify, when they occur. You need to know the situations. I've written a few of them down. Late in the quarter, when a shot goes out of bounds, the defensive team may want a timeout to regroup his defense. The other scenario where people don't really think about a lot, but you need to put it in your mind, when a team's been playing defense for a long period of time and the shot goes out of bounds. Well, what do you mean by that? So let's run a scenario. Say a team was a man down for a minute. Their defensive five were out there for, a whole minute. Now they become even. The offensive team keeps the ball for another, minute, take a few shots. The ball may or may not go out of bounds. They take another shot and it goes out of bounds. That defensive coach may want to get fresh players on. They've been playing defense for 2 or 3 minutes. You got to put that scenario in the back of your mind. That could happen anytime during a game. And we need to make sure that somebody's paying attention to the defensive coach when that ball goes out of bounds in those situations. So put that in the back of your mind. Long period of stretches where they're playing defense. It could be a man-up, man-down situation. It could be just a long possession by the offense. But they may want a timeout. That happens a lot more in the first half probably than the second half, because they have a tendency to save the timeouts in the second half for the offensive end. But just be aware of those situations. Another situation when the goalie's out and away from the crease. He's clearing the ball. The ball goes out of bounds. The defensive team may want to get a timeout to get the goalie back in. The goalie goes to the end line. There's contested play. Stick check on the goalie. Ball goes out of bounds. The defensive team may want a timeout to get the goalie back in the cage. Somebody's got to be paying attention to the defensive coach at that point in time. We're going to give you, on the next thing, a couple mechanic tips that may help you. It's not the responsibility of one official. Sometimes a single-side guy can pick up a timeout better, perhaps, than a trail that's busy doing something else. But in most situations, trail has got to pay attention to the defensive coach. It's a good habit to get into if you can get yourself into it as a trail official. Whenever the ball goes out of bounds, turn to the benches and take a look if you're not involved with that out of bounds. Most of the time we're not involved with calling that out of bounds, right? But still, if you are involved with calling that out of bounds, turn yourself, open up, and take a look at the coaches real quick. I tell you what, when you make that eye contact with the coach and you do it consistently, they're going to be appreciative of it, and they know that you're paying attention, and hopefully that they also know that you're not going to miss their timeout request. So make sure you try to make sure the trail consistently, make sure he's paying attention to the coach. You can also have a conversation, as you're running up the field, especially going to the offensive end as a lead. You can ask the coach, late in the quarter, what do you think, coach? You're going to let it play through? You're going to want a timeout? I'm going to go by you now. The trail's coming. A lot of coaches have a tendency to follow the lead and want a timeout from the lead, and the lead is busy behind the cage or with the play. There's a good chance he's going to miss it. So as you run by that coach, make him start thinking about the timeout and just tell him the trail's coming up, and he can help you with the timeout. And that puts another onus on the trail that, responsibilities switch during the game. Late in the quarter, as a trail, you should be trying to get yourself in position in front of that bench for that timeout, or close enough to the head coach to make sure you can hear that timeout. So you got to switch your mechanics depending on the situation of the game, for sure, about timeout. The other thing we've had a couple issues with this year, and not sure why, we're just not paying attention. We've had a couple balls go out on the end line. It may have appeared to the trail that the player got pushed. The lead may blow his whistle, and the trail's got to recognize if his hand's up in the air for a play on, or if he's going to call a push in the field of play, then they can't have the timeout. But if he's simply calling direction of play, they can have a timeout. There's been a couple situations where the trail's been confused by perhaps the lead signal, and the ball was just going out of bounds, pointing direction, which the team should have been entitled to a timeout. They weren't given a timeout, and the play's blown back in. And you know how it is when we do something like that, they shoot and score. So you got to know what your partner's calling. You got to pay attention to what he's calling on the end line, and you need to recognize whether the team can have that timeout or not. The other thing we want to talk about is offensive timeouts. Again, you need to think about the situations when they occur. Of course, late in the quarters, when the team carries the ball below the restraining line, that's, everybody recognizes that, I think. Some of the items we may not think about quick enough is when a player's getting double teamed, the coach feels it's a chance he's going to lose the ball. Again, these one-goal games, these one-possession games, critical that they keep possession. So their attack men, midfielder, getting double teamed below the restraining line, you got to be thinking timeout. Somebody's got to be listening to the coach, waiting for that timeout in those situations. The other thing is after a face-off. When the face-off guy carries that ball down below the restraining line, most of them can't handle the ball as well as the other guys on the team. The coach gets nervous, and he's going to be looking for a timeout when that face-off guy carries that ball down in that end. Same with the long pole, right? Unless that long pole's got a fast break, coaches again get nervous. They want that possession, and that's another time for a timeout that they'll be looking for. Again, after an offense possession, the defense made a loose ball. It's been scrummed around, and the offensive team has an opportunity to pick it up. They pick it up, and as soon as they pick it up, coach may be screaming for a timeout. All those situations, you have to, I call it, referee the timeout. You can't relax at any point during these situations. You've always got to have an ear open to the coach. The single side, again, may be able to help you with these timeouts, but the responsibility lays on the guys near the coaches for sure for that timeout. So offensive timeouts, some of the mechanics we can use. I'll talk a little bit about, informing coaches that many times the trail will be coming up. So you're running by that. If it's going to his offensive end and he's in front of his offensive players, you have that opportunity to tell him, hey, the trail's coming up. I'm going to go to the play, the trail come up to get your timeout. And a lot of times that'll make him turn and make sure he sees where the trail is. And hopefully the trail is going to be looking at the coach at that point in time. We talk a little bit about changing mechanics. The trail, the official needs to hustle and get in position for that timeout. Late in the quarters, you need to be up in position to hear that timeout. Again, we talked about settled situations. The trail needs to be cognizant of what the coaches may or may not want. We talked about the single side already, having a possibly a better vantage point, and that really happens in transition. So the lead is gone. He's concentrating on probably a fast break or, something that's happened behind the net. The trail's not in position yet. Single side guy may be able to take a look and pick up that timeout. The other situation we get into is late in the quarter when the offensive team's bringing it in, or anytime the offensive team's bringing it in. Specifically late in the quarter, I'd like to try to give my partner or have my partners give me a signal, okay, they're in the alley. And all I ask for is a simple from the single side that he points forward, direction of play, with the arm perpendicular to his hip. So it's hip height, pointing direction of play. That tells me that they can have a timeout. They're across the restraining line, but still in the alley. I know when he raises his hand, he can have a timeout, but the single side alley is a tough one to officiate the timeout. I'd be hesitant to call a timeout without some kind of signal that the ball is either entered the box or the ball is entered the alley. So again, pregame, talk about how you're going to tell your partners that the ball is in the alley and the offensive team is eligible for a timeout. I think the signal is pretty simple. If you guys can get used to doing that, I think it'll be beneficial for everybody. A couple things about preventive officiating in the timeout. During the pregame meeting with the coaches, I always ask them to provide us a visual signal along with a verbal signal for a timeout. Why? Because, again, that'll help the single side pick up the timeout call. If they're just yelling for a timeout, the single side's not going to hear it the majority of the time. The trail and the lead may not be in position to hear it. If they give a visual, the single side may be able to pick that up. So ask the coaches, especially if it's windy, if it's windy, if it's loud, I don't mind the coach coming on the, through the box a little bit to get a timeout. That's the only time I allow a coach to maybe come on the field to get a timeout. You just got to work that situation. All right, if it's really windy, you got to work through it. You still don't want to miss a timeout. I know it's by rule, it's illegal, but it is the right thing to do, and I think the spirit of the rule would allow that. So if a coach needs to come on to call a timeout, he's not coming on to argue with you guys. He's coming on to call a timeout to make sure he gets the timeout. I talked a little bit about it. It's often the first step in the launching pad if we don't get a timeout when they want a timeout. So if we do a better job recognizing them, the coaches do feel better about their ability to officiate that game, manage the game correctly. So you need to raise awareness about the timeout, these one possession games, and make sure we get them. The other thing I'd just briefly talk about the benefit of the doubt. And the benefit of the doubt probably goes more with the defensive timeout than anything else. If the defensive coach is asking for a timeout and it's about the same time as the whistle's blowing, give him the benefit of the doubt. Blow that, give him a timeout. All right. We can always sell it. Our whistle's always a second late after request. But if there's any doubt, give him the benefit of the doubt and give him a timeout. It's going to prevent a lot of problems. Tommy, got anything to add about that?
Yeah, I do actually, Tommy. And I'll keep it real simple. Everything that Tom has just said to all of us is basically, I know we're going to skip ahead to game management later, but these are all game management tools. Everything that Tom has talked about for the last 10 minutes is about communication with coaches, getting near the bench area, making sure that you establish eye contact with the coach so that the coach knows that you're looking at them. It's all those types of things that you need to be aware of to be able to manage a game properly. And if you do those things all game long, it'll become second nature to you, and it'll be easier for them and for you at the end of very important quarters or plays at the end of a game. So everything that Tom's talked about is a game management issue. And it's literally eye contact and communication, especially if it's windy, if it's loud. You need to be able to do what you have to do to establish some sort of contact with those coaches.
Very good. All right, so that's basically covering the officiating timeout. You know, that it's a good pregame topic. I encourage all you guys, this presentation will be posted on our website. Go and print it off, you know, review it, talk about the pregame by all means. Anything we can do to help will be beneficial.
Tommy, I got one more thing to mention to the guys here. We actually have a very difficult set of rules to deal with for timeouts. Whether the ball's in the field of play, whether it's out of bounds, whether there's a play on, whether they can get a timeout or not get a timeout. They have to be below the restraining line. These are all very difficult things that we are strapped with because of the rules. I have been in contact with some of the folks on the rules committee and Willie Scroggs to potentially try to make this easier for us. We have enough problems to manage other stuff. If these rules were changed a little bit, we probably would have an easier time with it. So I just want you to know that we are working possibly in that direction.
Like anywhere, anytime?
That would be nice.
Yeah, anywhere, anytime would be okay with me.
That would be nice.
All right. So we'll move on to play on and hopefully provide you a little help with the play on. Some of these ideas have come from my counterparts, people that are thought about these situations a lot. I've stole some stuff. I hope everybody steals some stuff from somebody. So, but as a group, I really think we can improve with the use of these play-ons. We get ourselves in trouble a lot with a play-on that goes too long. Becomes, again, then you got a live ball situation with two possible fouls, and you end up with simultaneous. There's a lot of things that can happen if we don't manage the play-ons. The biggest thing about it is we need to be sure that the team that was disadvantaged does not get disadvantaged the second time. A lot of times, you know, our play-ons, we throw a play-on up, the team may pick up the ball and we may take the play-on off, but, you know, they just barely got it in their stick. They're in a crowded area. They get checked again. Did they really gain their advantage back? So put that in the back of your mind. That team has to have a solid advantage back before that play-on should come off. You can have a play-on. The team could kind of get possession, get checked right away, lose the ball. You can blow that play-on dead at that point and award the ball. They deserve a possession because they did get disadvantaged. That's the purpose of the play-on, to give them advantage back. If they never really got the advantage back, don't be afraid to blow that dead and give it back to them. Should all play-ons be treated the same? It's a question for you. In my opinion, no. And I guess I would ask, if not, how do they vary? I'm going to try to go through 4 different scenarios in my mind about play-ons and how they do vary. Again, I've stole some of this from some very talented referees. So what we have here is pretty much a consensus from, you know, the referees that have been doing this a long time and they're very good at it. So how many categories? You know, I've already told you I break them down into 4 categories as we talk about play-ons in my pregame. And they are defensive play-ons, offensive play-ons, over and back play-ons, and then no play-ons. So as we go through this, I hope you can recognize, and when you're doing your games, you recognize the difference in these categories we're going to talk about, and change the way you call play-on in these situations. So what do we mean by an offensive play-on? You know, when does it happen? In the offensive end, or a player going toward the offensive end. Say, you know, the ball kicks out and the long pole picks it up right midfield, going on the fast break. That's what I consider an offensive play-on. Anything in the offensive half. This is what we typically think of a play-on, right? We're going to allow the play-on to continue, to allow them to have an opportunity to, as they're moving forward, to pick up the ball and possibly have a fast break, get a shot on goal, and gain your advantage back. Probably the one we do most consistently, in my opinion, is this type of play-on. You know, you don't want to be too quick here. You want the situation to play out. Again, it'd be a longer time with your hand up, and they never really do gain the advantage back, blow it dead, put it in their stick, and let them move forward. So it's going to be longer in length of the play-ons that we're going to talk about next. I think everybody's familiar with the offensive play-on. That's a typical play-on, in my opinion, and probably the way everybody else is calling every play-on that they have in the game. So where's the difference come in? I like to call them defensive play-ons. You know, happens when a team is disadvantaged in their own defensive area. All right, so they're playing defense. They strip the ball. The offensive team, the old offensive team, pushes the defensive long pole. The ball is 80 yards away from the goal that they're going to be going to, right? And probably majority of the time, they're going to be going toward the opposite end of the goal, toward the opposite end line, right? So they're going to be going the end line away from the goal. So their back is toward the goal they're going to try to score. You got to really think about how big an advantage that is to have a long play on at that point. Those play ons should be short. You should be able to turn that player around, get them going in the right direction toward their offensive end and a dead ball situation so they can move it forward. What happens if we allow that to go on? The long pole will pick it up, but guess what? He's either going to get trapped, he's either going to get rode hard toward that end line, and then you're going to have a turnover without them really gaining the advantage that they deserve. So defensive play-ons, in my opinion, are short play-ons, and a lot of others' opinions. That's when we have a short play-on. We want to give them the ball, turn them around, get the clear going, all right? So they do get their advantage back. So offense, a little bit longer. Defensive play-ons, short. Over and back play-on. How many times, you know, I challenge everybody on the phone, how many times you've seen a over and back play-on actually work to the new offensive team's advantage? Not very often. The ball typically does not squirt through. That's the only time I would extend an over and back play-on if the ball is moving quick enough to squirt through the players in midfield. But what typically happens is that play, the ball gets stopped, hung up somewhere in the first 5 yards of the over and back, because 9 times out of 10, it's not moving quick enough to squirt through. So you need to judge how fast that ball is moving and how long you're going to allow your play-on to go. If it's moving fast, I have a tendency, okay, I'm thinking about a little bit longer play-on. If it's moving slow toward the midfield, probably not going to be very long, right? Because even if the offensive player picks it up, what direction is he going again? Away from the goal, is back to the goal that he's going to. Where is the advantage gained back by the offensive team in that situation? He's going to pick up the ball, go in the wrong direction, and what's going to happen? The long pole is going to check his stick right away. So if you pull that play on down, he never gained his advantage back. That's why if the ball does not squirt through and the ball's not moving very fast, short play on at midfield, turn them around, get them to 5 yards, and blow it back in. All right, you're not going to get them to 5 yards all the time. It's kind of a messy restart, but make sure the defensive player does not play him if he didn't give him the 5 yards until he gains that 5 yards. So,
Tom, speaking of the restart, would you please discuss how you want? We have over and back where the ball just rolls up to the midline. We have over and back when a player misses a pass and the ball maybe doesn't land until it's 10 or 15 yards, 20 yards past the midline. Maybe our whistle is a little late. Can you please describe where you want that restarted?
Yeah. By rule, you're supposed to restart it where the play was blowing dead, right? Not necessarily where the violation happened, but where the play was blowing dead. So, yeah, we can be a little late. They may miss that pass. I think it's important to try to put it back into play where your whistle was blowing, and that's more evident why it should be fairly quick play on. So if the ball squirted through and it's rolling toward the goal, and for some reason the offensive team did not get it, now you're blowing the play dead at the restraining line. The offensive team should put it in play at the restraining line. We should try to have the single side put that in play. The lead should go to the goal. It gets a little hectic over by the bench area, right? Somebody's got to make sure they're out. I would suggest the lead, bring them out 5 yards, take off, point to the single, and let the single blow that back in so the lead can get to the goal. That gets a little messy. If the trail is close enough, you can come up and help them. But if it squirts through and you're allowing that play on to go, put it in play where you blew it dead down by the restraining line or whatever you're going to do. Don't bring it back to midfield. All right, no play on. Seen a couple games this year on TV that the officials conducting the face-off is called a play on, but then he has a face-off violation. You do not want a play on when you're going to have a face-off violation. All right, so no play on if you're going to call a face-off violation. If the violation that you're going to call is outside the face-off, then you have a play on, right? But if it's a face-off violation, do not call a play on. Just go ahead and blow the play dead. Tell them the violation. Signal how many violations it is, either before or after you put the ball back in play, whichever is convenient, and then get the game moving again. But again, if you're going to have a face-off violation, do not have a play-on signal. So those are the 4 categories of play-ons that we need to talk about. We'll go on to game management. Tommy's talked about a lot of this already, so we'll kind of go through it fairly quickly. Again, it's the time of year emotions are the highest. It's seniors competing possibly for the last game they're ever going to play in their life. So you got to understand the emotions are high. And of course, every call we make is assumed that the effect's going to affect the outcome of the game. All right. So be prepared for that. Be prepared for the coaches to be a little more excited. They still got to treat us with respect. Don't, I'm not saying that we get abused. No. They have to treat you with respect, but just be ready for it. And talk them through it. The communication Tommy talked about already. Every call we make is magnified, reviewed, stewed upon, talked about. Again, if you're ready, it's not a problem. You're going to make the calls you made all year, and you're going to be fine. Players, coaches, and fans are highly motivated and emotionally charged. Had a situation in the game recently that when we walked on the field with 32 minutes on the clock, one of the coaches was so upset he could hardly talk. There was some pregame activities that went on between the teams before we got on the field. So at that point, it changes how you have to officiate even the pregame. You're gonna make your presence known. After team introductions, you're going to be possibly at the 50-yard line, and don't let them carry your flag band and waivers across the midfield line on the other team's side. So there's steps that you need to take when you know the situation arises. The biggest thing there is, referee dead balls, referee every time. You're on the field, you're going to referee 100%. What I mean by that is, you got a charge-filled atmosphere. You're going to be monitoring the crossovers during timeouts, quarters. Don't let the teams just walk through the benches. Somebody's got to be present in there during the crossover of the teams going to the benches. All right. Once the benches get settled, then you can go do your stick checks or whatever. Stick checks secondary. You're gonna have to control the game and make sure you're officiating that game as good as you can. The end of the game, our responsibility just to make sure they get to the benches appropriately. Then we can get off the field. But again, we're monitoring that crossover at the end of the game as well. So don't relax during a timeout, a dead ball, a quarter break. You still got to officiate all the way through those. Again, raise the awareness, pregame, crossovers, game end, etc. And most importantly, be ready. Be ready for any certain situation. Tommy, got anything to add about that?
Just that I like the fact that I didn't see your PowerPoint until just now, and those are all the points that I touched on earlier. So that tells us we're all on the same page. It's an emotional charge time for all these teams and coaches, and we need to be aware of all of the options or issues that could come up. Covered in your pregame.
Very good. And the last thing I want to talk about tonight, again, is just a reminder of the new face-off mechanic that we implemented about a month ago, 3 weeks ago on the phone call, that the single side puts the ball back in play after face-off violations. Why? Because we want the other two referees, the defensive area lines, and keep everybody behind them because they're not supposed to be released. All right? So, again, just a little reminder about the new face-off mechanic, and hopefully everybody's adjusting to it. Sometimes we have what I call a brain fart, and we forget about that, and the trail ends up putting it in play when the play's going away from them, and nobody's refereeing that defensive area line. So just talk about it pregame, remind each other during the face-offs. Hey, if there's a violation, I got to restart. That's a single side. So that brings us to the end. I do want to thank everybody that does attend. I know PJ did it for the call. I think hopefully everybody can get something out of these calls. It's not very often an opportunity to get everybody back together after the clinics and conventions. So this is an attempt to do that. Again, we'll try to improve them, move them up in time frame, along with our rest of our education that hopefully we're going to start a little earlier next year than we did this year. Tommy, anything to add before we close out?
I'd like to thank again Charlie and PJ, and definitely you, Tommy, for setting this all up. It's a great venue. It's a great way to get through to all the guys. Thanks to everyone for attending, listening. Good luck the rest of the way. I know that the assigners are working hard to try and figure out what the assignments will be for the next few weeks. Best of luck to everybody along the way.
Kevin, as the executive director, do you have anything that you need to tell the group?
No, just if there's any, once assignments are made, if there's any travel situations, get hold of me as soon as possible. Once the names are entered into the ZebraWeb system, then I can go in and work on the travel aspects. But we can't post airfares and those type of things until the game is released, accepted by the official, and then the airplane icon is hit. So it sends me a note that you're looking to fly. If there's any issues with pay going forward, if it's Division 2 or 3, I know we get to the point where the season is ended and guys haven't been paid. This is separate from the conference tournaments and also the conference tournaments. But if we get to the point here soon where you haven't been paid, if it's Division 2 or 3, contact the assigner. If it's Division 1, start with an email to me. I know there's some concerns already, and a lot of times those things are just split between schools that are slow to pay, and then a system problem where maybe a airfare or information was entered after the check was cut. And then the third, which I discovered this week, is the Zebra Pay system, where they looked at the system on a certain date, locked the fees down, billed the schools, received their money, and then have paid officials, and the amount was incorrect because there may have been a change made on that game and or just an incorrect fee entered for travel. So anything on Division 1, send me an email, and I'll filter it out to the RAs. If we can solve it simply. If we can't, then we'll get the RAs involved. Division 2 or 3, go to the assigner for each one of those conferences. And I think the last thing is that in dealing with the game reports and the unsportsmanlike conducts and the ejections, I'm happy to report that it is the lowest total in the history of the sport by right now, should probably knock on wood because we're not done yet, by about 60% in Division 2 and 3, by 100% in Division 1 year to date. I'm going to try to figure out why and talk to all the parties involved, including some of the conference reps and the assigners in Division 2 and 3, junior college, and obviously Tommy and the RAs. And then I'll get a report out to everybody at the end of the season. And because so far it's been outstanding. And I just thank everybody for filling out the reports, getting them in a timely manner. So when we did have to react to things, it was taken care of by Saturday was taken care of by noon on Monday. And anything during the week was taken care of usually by noon the next day. So I just thank everybody for getting those reports in. And best of luck to everybody. Thanks, Tommy.
Gentlemen and ladies, if there is any on the phone tonight, appreciate your time and good luck the rest of the way and enjoy the off season. Thanks.
All right, everybody. Thank you.